Hi there. Thanks for joining me in my first devlog. I'm making a high-speed racing game called Trishu Drift for over 2 years now, and we just released the Steam page. In this series I want to start with an introduction to the game and show some insight into the development process. My name is Jan and I've been coding for over 11 years now. I started when I was 7 and somewhere along the line picked up Unity. From that point on I participated in a lot of game dev challenges and game jams, and published a lot of unfinished prototypes. Then, at a later point in time, I stopped game development because I didn't have any new ideas. Then, again, I finally decided to take part in a game development challenge, in which I would create a trailer in 1 week. So, the idea of Trishu Drift was born. I got tons of feedback for the trailer, and I decided, why not make it an actual game? That shouldn't be that hard, right? At that point in time, I wasn't really used to making 3D games, so the game looked really bad. But I decided I'm gonna put all my effort into it, and I'm gonna make this game great. So I started my research on how to actually calculate horsepower, torque, and everything else that makes the car move. I attempted over and over again to make the game look actually good instead of having those built-in Unity graphics. Well, that all changed when I switched to HDRP. I learned the full engine over the course of a year, and the game looks actually pretty good now. So naturally my inspiration came from Need for Speed and the Forza Horizon series. And so here we are in the current month, and I've been adding a lot of things to the game. Right now my main goal is to add tons of customization. So I added spoilers, rims, wheels, hoods, and all other kinds of customizations. The cool thing is I coded a whole database and inventory system around it to save the car's data once you actually customize it. I'm still working on the shop, but that's pretty much a thing for the next month. I also quickly coded a shop system that works together with the inventory and database system. So it looks pretty ugly, but you can click on a car, it shows the stats and the car, and you can click on yes or no to buy the car. But right now, something is missing, and that is an actual world to drive around, because before I just used a pre-made asset, but I want to change that. I want to have an open world, which might sound pretty crazy, but it's something I always wanted to do and work on. So I searched for a way to make an actual good-looking terrain that looks realistic, but the problem is, you can't really do that as an indie developer. So I found an asset called World Building Bundle by Procedural Worlds on the asset store and bought it. Not only was my wallet crying, but I also had a good map to work with. Now, even though this was fun to drive around and have an open world, it wasn't near finished. So I learned how to make shaders with the Unity's shader graph system, and after what felt like ages, I finally completed the shader for the road. Now let's create a drag strip, because every good racing game has one. Now I call it a drag strip, while in reality it's just a stretch cube that I placed on the terrain. Now I finally had somewhere to drive my cars on. But what about other things? It's just a cube on an empty terrain, right? So I embarked on the journey of creating destructible objects. And so I added in a system which could handle everything and was really performant, because you don't want to have 1,000 rigid bodies in one scene and just make them all interact with physics. Now, to solve that issue of having to render 1,000 objects, I created an object pooling system. How it works is, at the start of the game, it renders around 200 of those objects, and as soon as I drive into a trigger, it renders the object for that specific region. It compares the different objects and checks the name of them to make sure the right object gets spawned at the right location. And when I drive out of the region, everything just gets back into the pooling system. Not only does this save me a ton of performance, but it also helps with re-rendering the objects. So if I drive against a barrier, it gets respawned as soon as I drive out of the region and come back later. And I added in some context sparkles to make the game feel really satisfying and the car actually like it's a real object. That's all cool, but how do you know how fast you're going? So I also added a speedometer UI that updates according to the speed, and it can also switch to miles per hour for freedom units. So I also want a way to pause the game and add some settings to it. For example, change your controller inputs. On the topic of controls, I also added in a way to switch your controls. So you have, for example, Xbox controllers, PS4 controllers, and even steering wheels. So I created the UI, added the input system to it, the sound change system, and a ton of other features that you can use to improve your gameplay experience. But wait, what's a racing game without sound? Every good racing game, you know, has good sound. You can almost hear the engines in your ears. And that's what makes good engine sound. The cars need to feel real and heavy. And this took me another 3 or 4 months to finally find the right solution. And I think the 3 or 4 months of work really did the trick, because just listen to how good the car sounds now. Not only does the engine feel heavy, but it actually feels like it's there, because as soon as you drive with high RPM and go down a lot, you have an exhaust flame and a really nice crackling sound of the exhaust. Now, the weather system was the hardest part in my opinion, because I needed the rain to feel like it's on the car, and it needs to look like it's on the car and on the streets and on the camera. Now, it was difficult, but it didn't take that much time like the other things I did. So the rain is falling from the sky, it's pooling on the streets, and the best thing of all is it's pooling and dripping on the car, the rain is flowing down, and you have the same effect on the camera, which in my opinion just looks perfect and realistic. And I also used scripts to add in the function that you can drive and the rain flows off the windshield the faster you go. Now that's what I call a good weather system. But that's all I have for you this month. See you in the next episode. Don't forget to wishlist the game on Steam. It's the first link in the description. And don't forget to subscribe.